Elena and Ryan had the kind of love others envied. A story that began with shy smiles in college corridors and ended with wedding vows beneath a canopy of stars. He was magnetic, confident, intelligent, with a future that promised luxury and success. She was his quiet balance, a dreamer with paint-stained hands and a heart that saw beauty in everything. Together, they were the definition of happiness. Mornings began with shared laughter over burnt toast. Evenings ended with soft music, whispered promises, and plans for the family they couldn't wait to start. To the outside world, they were perfect, the golden couple everyone adored. But behind Ryan's captivating smile hid an insatiable hunger, not for love but for power. His recent promotion opened doors to a glittering world of executives, expensive parties, and people who measured worth in wealth. Slowly, Elena felt his warmth fading, replaced by pride and cold ambition. She brushed it off, convincing herself it was just stress, that the man she fell in love with was still there. But one night, when Ryan's words cut through the silence like a knife, she realized love couldn't heal what greed had already poisoned. When Elena saw the two pink lines appear, her hands trembled with joy. Tears of happiness filled her eyes as she imagined tiny fingers, soft giggles, and the family she had always dreamed of. She waited eagerly for Ryan to return home, rehearsing how she would tell him the news, maybe with a wrapped baby bib or a small note saying, "You're going to be a dad." But when she finally told him, the look on his face wasn't joy, it was irritation. His jaw tightened and his voice dripped with annoyance. "Not now, Elena. A baby will ruin everything I've worked for." The words sliced through her heart. She thought he was just shocked, but soon she discovered the real reason. Ryan had been spending late nights not at work, but with Vanessa, a striking model with expensive taste and a cruel smirk. Vanessa sneered at Elena's simplicity, whispering in Ryan's ear that a wife like her didn't suit his image. Blinded by ambition and lust, Ryan made the most heartless demand of all. He forced Elena to end the pregnancy. She begged him through tears, her voice breaking, but his decision was final. When the procedure was done, Elena felt hollow. That day, she lost more than her child. She lost the man she thought she knew. The days following the abortion blurred together. Long hours of staring at walls, endless nights where sleep never came. The house that once echoed with laughter and love now felt like a mausoleum of broken dreams. Every corner reminded Elena of what she had lost. Not just her baby, but the warmth that once filled her heart. Ryan came home less and less, and when he did, it was only to change suits or take phone calls. The scent of another woman's perfume lingered on his clothes, sharp and unfamiliar. Soon he stopped pretending altogether. He dined with Vanessa in public, posed for photos, and smiled as though he hadn't destroyed someone's world. When Elena finally confronted him, trembling but determined, his words sliced deeper than any wound. "You were weak," he said coldly. "Vanessa knows how to live, not cry." That night, something inside Elena broke completely. She packed a small bag, her sketchbook, a few clothes, and the pieces of her broken spirit, and walked out without looking back. Her parents welcomed her with open arms, their hearts aching for their fragile daughter. And as Elena wept into her mother's lap, she whispered, barely audible, "I'll never beg for love again." V1 end. Months passed in quiet recovery, though Elena's heart still carried the scars of what Ryan had done. Then came the strange spells, the dizziness, the nausea, the exhaustion that never seemed to fade. Her mother urged her to see a doctor, and reluctantly she agreed. When the test results came back, the doctor's eyes softened. "Mrs. Hart, you're pregnant. In fact, you were carrying twins. One didn't make it, but the other survived." For a moment, Elena couldn't breathe. The world spun around her, disbelief, grief, and overwhelming relief flooding her all at once. She pressed her trembling hands to her abdomen, tears falling freely. Against every cruelty, against every dark force that had tried to destroy her, life had found a way. In that fragile heartbeat, she made a silent vow. "You'll have the life I never did, full of love, safety, and peace." With her mother's support and a modest inheritance from her late father, Elena left the country under her maiden name. She studied business management while working late shifts, balancing textbooks and bottles, exhaustion and hope. Through sleepless nights and quiet mornings, she learned to smile again, because in her twins' laughter, she found her reason to live and to rise. 3 years passed like a whirlwind of determination and quiet triumph. Elena, once shattered by betrayal, had rebuilt herself from the ashes of grief. The timid, heartbroken woman who had packed a small bag and left her life behind was gone, replaced by a visionary, self-made entrepreneur whose talent spoke louder than her pain. Her art and design brand, Eleonora Studios, began modestly online, showcasing delicate, meaningful pieces that resonated with people worldwide. Slowly, her work went viral. Social media buzzed with praise. Luxury investors began taking notice. But Elena was cautious, seeking not just wealth, but partners who respected her vision and integrity. Enter Mr. Kingston, a retired millionaire with an eye for talent. Unlike Ryan, he treated Elena as an equal, valuing her ideas, her creativity, and her leadership. With his support, she expanded Eleonora Studios into a global enterprise. Showrooms opened in Paris, New York, and Tokyo, each a testament to her resilience and ingenuity. Through it all, Elena remained devoted to her twins, Ethan and Emma. She filled their lives with love, laughter, and the lessons of compassion, steering them away from bitterness. Yet deep in her heart, a quiet certainty lingered. Destiny would one day bring her face to face with the man who had once tried to destroy her. Her limousine, her empire, her elegance, everything she had built was proof that pain, when mastered, can become unstoppable power. Meanwhile, Ryan's carefully curated life of luxury and charm began to unravel. Vanessa, once the glamorous model who had captivated him, revealed a darker side. Arrogance, greed, and a cruel indifference to everything beyond her reflection. Rumors swirled through social circles. Scandals whispered behind closed doors. The company Ryan had once led with confidence stumbled, profits declined, and board members questioned his leadership. As pressure mounted, Ryan sought solace in alcohol, his nights stretching into endless drinking sessions that left him hollow and exhausted. He began to recognize, too late, that Vanessa's loyalty had always been tied to his wealth, not to him. When the money dried up, she left without a second thought, taking what little remained of his assets and leaving him stranded. Debts piled up, lawsuits loomed, and his once sterling reputation crumbled into ruin. Yet even in the midst of his downfall, Ryan's mind refused to acknowledge the irony. He thought of Elena, imagining her broken and struggling, never expecting to cross paths with her again. But fate has a way of turning the tables. One day, as he sat brooding over reports of failed deals, a black limousine pulled up outside his office. The world he thought he controlled was about to collide with the woman he had tried to destroy. Ryan stood outside the crumbling headquarters of his once thriving company, fuming over the latest financial reports and mounting debts. The streets were busy with reporters, employees whispering, and the occasional honking of impatient cars. He had grown accustomed to attention, but this day felt different. Heavy, almost ominous. Suddenly, the roar of a sleek black limousine drew everyone's eyes. Cameras flashed instinctively as the tinted windows rolled down. A woman stepped out, tall, poised, exuding confidence with every step. Her white suit shimmered under the sunlight, tailored perfectly, sunglasses masking the calm fire in her gaze. Ryan froze. His chest tightened. The world seemed to slow. It was Elena. 3 years had passed, and she had transformed completely. No longer the timid, grieving wife he had tried to destroy, she now radiated quiet authority and elegance. Beside her were 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl, their features unmistakably his. "Elena, those," he stammered, unable to finish. "Yes," she said smoothly, her voice calm but piercing. "Your children. The ones you tried to erase." Photographers swarmed, capturing every moment as Elena signed documents to acquire his company, officially taking control. For the first time, Ryan truly saw what strength looked like. Composed, resilient, and untouchable. And it terrified him. The empire he had once dominated was now in the hands of the woman he had tried to break. The boardroom was silent except for the faint hum of air conditioning. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, illuminating the polished mahogany table and the tense faces gathered around it. Elena entered with measured steps, her posture straight, her white suit immaculate, exuding an aura of authority that silenced everyone in the room. Ryan's eyes widened the moment he saw her, the woman he thought he had broken years ago now standing like a storm ready to strike. "I'm here to finalize the acquisition," Elena said, her voice calm yet edged with steel. "You will sign over your shares, or the fraud documents I have will ensure your career ends, permanently." Ryan's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the table. "You planned this," he whispered, disbelief and fear mingling in his tone. "No," Elena replied softly, her gaze unwavering. "You did. The day you killed our child, the day you chose ambition and lust over love, you set this in motion." Every insult he had thrown, every cold glance, every selfish act echoed in his mind. With shaking hands, he signed the papers, his empire slipping through his fingers. Later he approached her, voice low, desperate. "Elena, please. I've lost everything." She looked at him with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "So did I," she said quietly. "But I rebuilt. That is the difference between us." Vanessa had always thrived on attention and wealth, and news of Elena's meteoric rise stung more than she cared to admit. When she heard that Elena had become a global sensation, running Eleonora Studios and acquiring Ryan's company, Vanessa decided to make her presence known, pretending to be friendly, supportive, even charming. She reached out with feigned warmth, sending messages laced with flattery and subtle reminders of their shared past. Elena, however, had learned the hard way. She smiled politely, her eyes cool and unreadable, aware that Vanessa's intentions were never genuine. She didn't need to react. She had grown far beyond the woman who once let others dictate her worth. The real drama unfolded during a high-profile charity gala. Cameras flashed as Elena took the stage to announce a multi-million-dollar donation to a women's shelter, the very sanctuary that had nurtured her recovery and given her purpose. The crowd erupted in applause, and Elena's presence radiated power, grace, and resilience. Meanwhile, Vanessa's carefully crafted facade crumbled. Security approached her discreetly, escorting her out after allegations of fraud and financial misconduct surfaced. Whispers followed her every step as she vanished into the night, powerless. In that moment, karma had completed its full circle. Elena didn't need to fight for recognition. She had it, fully earned. She held the power now, and she wielded it with dignity and quiet triumph. Elena hadn't returned to her childhood town in years, not since the pain of her past had driven her away. But today, the visit wasn't for sorrow or regret. It was for remembrance and closure. The town felt smaller, quieter than she remembered, yet comforting in its familiarity. With Ethan and Emma by her side, holding freshly picked flowers, she walked slowly toward her parents' graves. The twins' tiny hands clutched hers tightly, their innocent faces reflecting curiosity and awe. Elena knelt before the headstones, brushing her fingers over the engraved names with tenderness. A lump rose in her throat as she whispered, "I kept my promise. We're free." A gentle breeze stirred the trees, carrying a sense of peace, as if her parents' spirits were smiling down, blessing the woman their daughter had become. The sunlight dappled through the leaves, casting a warm glow over the serene cemetery. Her twins laughed and ran toward the sleek black limousine parked nearby, their giggles echoing against the quiet streets. To Elena, the car was more than a symbol of success. It was a testament to her journey, a marker of victory over every hardship she had endured. Looking up at the expansive sky, a faint smile curved her lips. Her story was no longer about betrayal, loss, or revenge. It was about rebirth, strength, and transforming every wound into lasting wisdom, a legacy she would pass to her children. Years had passed since Elena had reclaimed her life, Yet the memories of betrayal and loss remained as quiet reminders of how far she had come. Her foundation, Eleonora Empowerment, had expanded globally, providing support, education, and shelter to countless women who had suffered in silence. From the skyscrapers of New York to the busy streets of Tokyo, her vision spread hope and opportunity, becoming a symbol of resilience. Ethan and Emma, now growing into bright, compassionate children, were the living proof that love and care could flourish even after the harshest storms. Their laughter filled the halls of her offices and homes alike, a melody that reminded Elena daily of her strength and perseverance. During a televised interview, a journalist leaned forward and asked gently, "Do you ever regret what happened to you?" Elena's lips curved into a serene smile, her gaze calm and unwavering. "No," she replied softly, "because pain taught me how strong love can be, when you finally give it to yourself." As the camera pulled back, she walked toward her waiting limousine, her children's laughter echoing beside her. In the distance, the setting sun cast a golden glow across the horizon, bathing Elena in light. The woman who had once begged for love now stood as living proof that grace, resilience, and self-worth always triumph, a story of victory etched in her eyes and heart. The rain lashed against the glass walls of the Cole mansion, each thunderclap echoing the chaos inside. Clara Evans, 8 months pregnant and trembling, lay sprawled on the cold marble floor. Her breaths came in shallow gasps, her hands clutching her swollen belly as pain ripped through her body. Just minutes earlier, her husband Ryan Cole had been there, towering furious, his face twisted with rage. "You've ruined everything," he'd shouted before storming out, slamming the door so hard the chandeliers shook. Now she was alone. The house that once held laughter and love was silent except for the storm's fury. Clara tried to crawl toward her phone, but her body gave out. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling. "Stay with me, my baby." Her vision blurred, the world fading to black. A neighbor's panic-filled call brought an ambulance racing through the storm. Paramedic Lucas Grant burst inside, kneeling beside her, his hands moving with urgency. "Pulse weak, starting compressions," he barked to his team. Her heart flatlined once in the ambulance. Lucas leaned close, refusing to surrender. "Come on, Clara. You're not leaving tonight." A moment later, a faint heartbeat answered. Her eyes fluttered open, and fate quietly rewrote her story. Only a few months before that stormy night, Clara Evans Cole had lived in a world that glittered with perfection. The city saw her as the ideal billionaire's wife, graceful, charitable, and radiant in every magazine cover photo beside her husband, Ryan Cole, one of the most powerful corporate moguls in the country. But behind the camera flashes and gala smiles, their marriage was crumbling. Ryan had grown distant, his phone always buzzing, his meetings stretching late into the night, his touch colder than marble. Clara blamed the pressure of his empire, the endless deals, and the ruthless world he moved in. In truth, Ryan's world had simply shifted to Sabrina Holt, his ambitious and calculating executive assistant. Sabrina was everything Clara wasn't: daring, manipulative, and unafraid to stroke Ryan's ego. She knew exactly how to make him feel invincible. While Clara carefully decorated the nursery and pressed her ear to her belly, whispering lullabies to their unborn child, Ryan was miles away in a penthouse suite, with another woman. One evening, as he came home reeking of expensive perfume, she looked at him with tearful eyes. "You've changed, Ryan." He didn't flinch. His smirk was sharp as a knife. "I've just stopped pretending, Clara." That night, she realized love wasn't blind, it was bleeding. But she still clung to hope, unaware that her husband was already rewriting their future without her in it. The mansion that once echoed with laughter had turned into a silent battlefield. Every word between Clara and Ryan now carried the weight of venom. His temper, once hidden behind a polished smile, had grown uncontrollable. "Do you even look at yourself?" Ryan spat one night, his voice thick with disdain. "You've let yourself go. You make me look weak." His cruelty struck deeper than any physical wound. Clara stood there, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly, the other gripping the edge of the counter to stop herself from trembling. When he wasn't yelling, he ignored her entirely, glued to his phone, exchanging flirtatious messages with Sabrina Holt, the woman who had become both his obsession and Clara's torment. In the quiet hours of loneliness, Clara turned to her canvas. Her brush became her voice, the colors her only refuge. She painted serene beaches, soft sunsets, meadows untouched by pain, worlds where her child could one day breathe peace. Her best friend, Hannah, noticed the bruises of exhaustion beneath Clara's eyes. "You have to leave, Clara," she urged, "before he destroys you." But Clara only shook her head weakly. "He's my husband. He just needs time." Then one evening, a photo surfaced online. Ryan and Sabrina, hand in hand, smiling for cameras. The brush fell from Clara's fingers. Tears blurred her vision as the paint smeared across her canvas, her final illusion dissolving into chaos. "I deserve better," she whispered to her unborn child. "Even if it kills me to walk away." The night the storm broke, so did Clara's final thread of hope. Rain battered the glass walls of the mansion, thunder shaking the sky like the echo of all the words left unsaid. She stood in the living room, trembling but resolute, waiting for him to come home. When Ryan finally entered, smelling of whiskey and perfume, she didn't shout. She simply looked at him, her voice calm yet trembling. "I know about her, Ryan. About Sabrina." For a brief moment, silence filled the air, thick, suffocating. Then his lips curved into a cruel smirk. "You were a mistake, Clara. All of this a mistake. I don't want this life, or that child." Her eyes widened, tears glistening as she whispered, "That child is yours." He turned away without hesitation, shrugging off her words like dust. "I stopped caring a long time ago." The door slammed behind him, the echo slicing through her heart. Hours later, pain ripped through her abdomen, sharp, unbearable. She collapsed onto the marble floor, clutching her belly as she gasped for breath. "Please, someone help," she cried weakly, but no one came. Her phone slid from her trembling hand, screen cracking as the call to 911 went unanswered. Outside, lightning illuminated the storm, a cruel reflection of the chaos within her. By the time a concerned neighbor called emergency services, Clara was barely conscious. Lucas Grant, the paramedic, knelt beside her, drenched, desperate, determined. "Stay with me," he urged, pressing against her chest as she drifted in and out of consciousness. Through blurred vision, she saw his steady eyes, a lifeline in the storm. Her world faded to black. Then, faintly, a sound. Beep, beep, beep. Her heart began to beat again. When Clara finally wakes, the world feels distant. Sterile lights, quiet machines, and the steady hum of the hospital. Her body aches, her throat dry, but the first thing she sees is a man sitting beside her, head bowed, exhaustion carved into his face. Lucas lifts his gaze, relief softening his tired eyes. "Welcome back," he murmurs, voice trembling with emotion. She blinks, confused. "The baby." He smiles faintly and points to the incubator across the room. "She's a fighter, just like her mom." Tears spill silently down Clara's cheeks. The last thing she remembered was pain and darkness. Now she was alive, her child alive, because this stranger refused to give up. When the doctor tells her she was clinically dead for nearly a minute, her breath catches. Panic grips her chest, memories of Ryan's cruelty flashing through her mind. Lucas steadies her trembling hands. "You're safe now. I promise." In the days that follow, he becomes her anchor. Through every panic attack, every sleepless night, he stays, not out of duty but something deeper. He tells her stories of his work, the people he's tried to save. "You were different," he confesses softly one evening. "I can't explain it. I just couldn't lose you." Clara blushes, looking away. For the first time in months, she feels seen, not as someone's property or mistake, but as a person worth saving. In his calm presence, she senses something she thought she'd lost forever: hope. Freedom came softly, like the whisper of ocean waves against the shore. After weeks in the hospital, Clara finally left behind the cold white walls and the ghosts of her pain. Lucas and Hannah helped her move into a small seaside cottage, a place filled with sunlight and silence, far away from the chaos she once called home. Her daughter, a tiny miracle, slept peacefully in her arms. Clara named her Hope, because that was all she had left and all she needed. Days settled into gentle rhythms. In the mornings, she painted the sunrise from her porch, gold and pink blending together like a promise of healing. Each brushstroke became a step away from the past, a quiet declaration that she was still alive. Lucas stopped by often, sometimes to fix a broken window, sometimes just to bring her fresh bread or flowers from the market. His presence was steady like the tide, never overwhelming, always there. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara turned to him. "You saved my life, Lucas." He smiled softly, shaking his head. "You saved your own. I just refused to let you give up." His words sank deep into her soul. For the first time in months she didn't feel weak, she felt strong. And yet love scared her. Her heart had been broken by the man who swore to protect it. She wasn't ready to trust again. Lucas understood. He didn't ask for more. He simply brushed a strand of hair from her face and said gently, "I'll be here whenever you're ready." That night, as hope stirred and the waves hummed outside, Clara whispered to herself, "Maybe this is what healing looks like. Karma doesn't knock, it breaks the door down." Ryan Cole, once the man with everything, watched his empire crumble piece by piece. The luxury penthouse, the fast cars, the fame, all slipping through his fingers like dust. His affair with Sabrina Holt, the woman he thought would elevate his power, had detonated into public scandal. Photos of their lavish getaways and confidential deal leaks flooded the headlines. Investors fled. Partners withdrew. Sabrina vanished overnight, taking millions from his offshore accounts and leaving behind a single note. "You taught me well." For the first time, Ryan stood alone in silence. No boardrooms, no cameras, no one left to manipulate. The echo of his own cruelty haunted him. Every memory of Clara, her laughter, her patience, her love, struck like a ghost's whisper reminding him of what he destroyed. One morning, while scrolling through his shattered reputation online, a headline made his blood run cold. "Survivor of near-fatal pregnancy incident opens art center for single mothers. Clara Evans." The photo beneath it showed her radiant and alive, standing beside Lucas Grant. In her arms, a smiling baby girl, Hope. Ryan drove for hours to find her, the art center glowing like a sanctuary. When Clara stepped outside, sunlight wrapped around her like armor. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice breaking. "I lost everything." Clara looked at him with quiet strength. "You lost yourself long before you lost me, Ryan." Lucas joined her then, protective but composed, a man who didn't need to prove his worth. As Ryan turned away, tears stinging his eyes, realization struck. He hadn't just lost his wife. He'd lost the right to be in the world she built from the ashes he left behind. The grand hall of the city's art museum gleamed with soft golden light. Guests moved through rows of paintings, each canvas a window into Clara's soul. The exhibition, titled Resurrection, captured her journey from darkness to dawn, a phoenix rising, a mother reborn, a woman rediscovering her voice. Every stroke of color carried meaning, deep reds for the pain that once consumed her, gentle blues for healing, and luminous golds for the love that finally found her. Critics called it a triumph of survival through art. But for Clara, it wasn't about fame. It was about closure. Lucas stood beside her, his suit crisp but his eyes soft, the same eyes that refused to give up on her that stormy night. Hope, now a bright and curious toddler, giggled as she twirled near their feet, a living embodiment of everything Clara once thought she'd lost. When the applause faded and the music swelled, Lucas leaned close and whispered, "I think you've painted my favorite story tonight." She smiled, tilting her head. "Which one?" "Ours," he said simply. Clara laughed, her heart light for the first time in years. Then Lucas took her hand, the warmth steady and real. "Clara Evans," he murmured, "will you let me spend my life proving that real love heals?" Tears sparkled in her eyes, not from sadness but from peace. "You already have," she whispered. As they kissed under the glow of chandeliers, applause filled the hall once more, not just for the artist but for the woman who lived again. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was something rarer. Love reborn not from rescue, but from the courage to heal and be whole again. Years later, the world feels softer, touched by peace instead of pain. Clara and Lucas walk hand in hand along the same stretch of beach where her story of rebirth began. The salty breeze carries laughter as little hope runs ahead, her tiny footprints tracing joy into the wet sand. The ocean, once a symbol of Clara's loneliness, now glows golden under the sunset, endless, forgiving, alive. Seagulls drift overhead as the tide hums a gentle lullaby. In their seaside cottage, Clara's art studio overlooks the waves. Her paintings now hang in galleries across the world, not for fame but for meaning. Each piece whispers of courage, motherhood, and the quiet power of beginning again. Lucas still works as a paramedic, saving lives without seeking recognition, the same man who once refused to let her die, who taught her what love truly means. Every year, on the anniversary of that storm, Clara lights a single candle by the window. Not in grief but in gratitude. "I thought that night ended me," she says softly. Lucas smiles, brushing her cheek. "Sometimes life breaks us only to rebuild us stronger." As hope's laughter echoes in the wind, Clara knows. She didn't just survive. She was reborn. Claire adjusted the soft silk of her maternity dress, her hand instinctively resting on her rounded belly as she took a deep breath. The night air outside their sprawling mansion smelled faintly of roses from the perfectly manicured gardens, mingling with the faint hum of distant music. Inside, the grand hall glittered under the crystal chandeliers, casting golden reflections across marble floors. Ethan, her husband, was the center of it all, his tailored tuxedo impeccable, his smile charming yet rehearsed, as he mingled effortlessly with the crowd of socialites, influencers, and high-profile friends who had arrived to celebrate another one of his meticulously orchestrated soirees. Claire had always loved parties in the past, but this time, with her pregnancy showing more with each passing week, she felt an unusual mixture of excitement and vulnerability. Her heels clicked lightly against the polished floor, and she forced herself to smile as she approached Ethan. He glanced at her briefly, an expression flickering across his face that she didn't like. Leaning close, he murmured just loud enough for her to hear, "Claire, you're kind of ruining the vibe." The word stung sharper than she expected, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. The excitement she had carried dissolved into a fragile knot of embarrassment and self-doubt. Her stomach churned, not from hunger, but from humiliation, a pang she hadn't anticipated. She forced herself to inhale slowly, smoothing the dress over her hips, trying to regain composure in front of the gathering crowd. As she navigated the room, she encountered a mix of reactions from the guests. Some smiled warmly, offering subtle nods of encouragement or compliments about her radiant pregnancy glow. Others whispered behind champagne flutes, their eyes darting toward Ethan with knowing smirks, silently judging Claire's presence. Each interaction made her more aware of the delicate social dance she had to maintain. Beneath the glittering lights and lively chatter, Claire felt the tug-of-war within herself, the desire to enjoy the evening and remain part of her husband's world, against the emotional fragility that pregnancy had amplified. She reminded herself quietly that tonight was about more than Ethan's ego. It was about her strength, her presence, and the life growing inside her. Claire took a cautious step into the heart of the party, her hand lightly grazing her belly as she moved. The room was alive with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the hum of upbeat music. Determined to be part of the evening, she offered polite smiles to the guests she passed, nodding at acquaintances and exchanging light conversation. "It's so wonderful to see you," she said to a young socialite, her voice warm but slightly strained, aware of every gaze lingering on her figure. Ethan, standing nearby with a drink in hand, leaned toward a small circle of his friends and whispered just loudly enough for Claire to hear, "Honestly, you're kind of dampening the energy tonight." His tone was casual, almost teasing, but the weight of his words struck Claire like a cold breeze. The room seemed to pause for a fraction of a second, the laughter faltering as a few guests exchanged awkward glances. Some looked shocked at his bluntness. Others, smirking quietly, seemed entertained by the display. Claire felt her chest tighten, a flush of embarrassment creeping up her neck. She wanted to disappear, to retreat to a quiet corner and hide from the judgmental stares. Her mind raced, replaying the insult, questioning herself, and wondering how her life had shifted so dramatically. The pregnancy had changed her body, her energy, and her priorities. But had it changed the way Ethan saw her entirely? In the quiet corners of her thoughts, flashes of love for her husband still lingered. She remembered tender moments, promises whispered late at night, and the man she once believed would protect and cherish her. And yet, a creeping doubt settled in. Had he always harbored this cruelty beneath his polished smile, or was it something new, something she could no longer excuse? Claire forced herself to lift her chin, smoothing the front of her dress, silently promising herself she would not let this first jab define the night, or her sense of self. Claire wandered through the crowded room, trying to anchor herself amidst the swirling conversations and laughter. She felt the subtle shifts of attention, the tiny glances darting her way, the half-smiles exchanged among Ethan's friends. Whispers floated through the air like drifting smoke, punctuated by stifled chuckles. She could feel their eyes on her, dissecting every movement, every nervous laugh, every adjustment of her flowing dress. It was impossible not to notice how Ethan's friends smirked quietly, exchanging knowing looks that made her stomach tighten further. Amid the crowd, Claire spotted Sophie, her closest friend, sidling over with a soft smile. "Don't let them get to you," Sophie murmured, offering a reassuring squeeze of Claire's arm. The gesture helped, even if only a little, but tension coiled tightly in Claire's chest. She felt trapped, a performer on a stage she hadn't chosen, watched by a sea of silent critics. Determined to participate, she moved toward Ethan, opening her mouth to ask a simple question about the music or the catering. But he barely glanced at her, turning instead to laugh loudly with a group of colleagues. The dismissal was subtle yet pointed, and Claire felt a ripple of heat crawl up her neck. Guests nearby shifted uneasily, some exchanging quick glances as if to silently acknowledge the awkwardness, while others whispered, curious to see how she would react. A neighbor, leaning close to a friend for privacy, added fuel to the fire with a casual remark, "Let's just keep the party light tonight, huh?" The words, meant to sound harmless, landed sharply, their meaning clear. Claire was the cause of the tension. Claire's chest tightened. She wanted to cry, wanted to vanish into the shadows, yet she clenched her hands, forcing herself to stand tall. No matter what whispers or smirks filled the room, she vowed she would not let tears fall before them. Not tonight, not here. Feeling the pressure of the crowded room and the weight of stifled whispers, Claire quietly excused herself from the main hall. She moved toward the balcony, the warm summer night brushing against her skin, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the gardens below. The distant hum of laughter and music softened here, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the occasional clink of glasses from inside. She leaned against the railing, letting herself take a deep, calming breath. Her heart pounded from embarrassment and frustration, and for a moment, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of the evening's humiliation. A polite cough drew her attention. Standing a few steps away was Liam, a guest she had met only a handful of times but who had always struck her as respectful and genuine. His eyes held no judgment. Instead, they were warm and understanding. "Claire," he said softly, "are you okay? You seem tense." She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, but the kindness in his tone allowed her to exhale some of the tension she'd been carrying. "It's been a bit overwhelming," she admitted quietly, her voice tinged with vulnerability. Liam nodded sympathetically. "It's hard to be yourself when people are not exactly supportive," he said carefully, glancing toward the balcony doors as if aware of Ethan's theatrics. As they spoke, Claire began to remember her own strength, the determination she had shown through her career, through her personal challenges, and now through pregnancy. Liam listened, offering small, affirming comments, and without ever attacking Ethan directly, he subtly questioned the fairness of her treatment. "No one should make you feel less than because of something as natural as this," he said, his words planting quiet seeds of courage in her heart. Claire's posture straightened, her chest lifting slightly with renewed confidence. She realized that the humiliation she had felt did not define her. With a calm yet determined exhale, she decided she would not allow the night, or Ethan, to diminish her. She would return to the party, but this time she would carry herself with quiet strength, unwilling to be humiliated any longer. The evening had already stretched into the early hours, and the golden glow of chandeliers reflected off glasses filled with champagne and wine. Ethan, his usually composed demeanor softened by the alcohol, moved through the crowd with a louder, more boisterous energy. Claire watched from a distance, her heart tightening with every exaggerated laugh and exaggerated gesture he made. She could see the faint smirks on the faces of his friends, the way they hung on his words, encouraging his behavior without realizing, or perhaps caring, how cruel it sounded. Ethan stepped onto a small raised platform near the center of the hall, raising his glass to capture the attention of every guest. The chatter dimmed slightly as eyes turned toward him, expecting charm, spectacle, or a witty toast. With a mischievous grin, he cleared his throat. "You know," he began, voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "pregnancy is a wonderful thing, really. But sometimes," he paused dramatically, gesturing toward Claire, "it can kill a party vibe." A ripple of laughter spread across some of the guests, nervous chuckles mingling with uncertain glances. Others stiffened, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to speak up. Claire's cheeks burned hotter than before. She felt every eye in the room on her, each one a mirror reflecting her humiliation. Her hands trembled slightly, and her breaths came shallow, anxiety gnawing at her chest. The pregnancy added another layer of fear and vulnerability. Her body already aching, her emotions heightened, and her sense of control slipping further with every snide remark. She tried to move away, to find some corner where she could gather herself, but the room seemed to close in, every guest a spectator of her discomfort. Her mind raced with thoughts of escape, of confronting Ethan, of whether she could endure the rest of the night without breaking down entirely. The suspense thickened as the audience, both inside the story and among the guests, waited silently for her reaction. Would she retreat quietly, humiliated, or finally stand up to the cruel display? The tension in the room was palpable, a fragile thread between laughter and outrage, teasing the moment when Claire's composure might finally snap, or, perhaps, transform into something much stronger. Claire's chest tightened, but this time, it wasn't just embarrassment or fear, it was determination. She could feel the life growing inside her, a small but powerful reminder of her own strength. No longer could she allow Ethan's cruelty to dominate the night, nor could she let the whispers and smirks of the guests define her. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she stepped forward, moving toward the center of the room where Ethan still held the attention of the crowd. "Ethan," she called, her voice cutting through the murmurs and clinking glasses, strong and unwavering. The room fell into a sudden hush, eyes turning toward her in surprise. Ethan, caught mid-laugh, turned with a raised eyebrow, a smirk tugging at his lips as if he thought she was about to fumble. But Claire's gaze was steady, her posture firm. "I've had enough of your comments," she continued, her tone clear and precise. "Enough of your jokes about my pregnancy. Enough of treating me as if my presence is a problem for your perfect little parties." A ripple of shock passed through the guests. Some leaned in, intrigued, while others exchanged glances of disbelief. Ethan's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. "Claire, you're overreacting," he said defensively, attempting to dismiss her words. "It's just a joke, don't make a scene." But Claire was unstoppable now. "A joke? Standing here, humiliating me in front of everyone, trying to make me feel ashamed of carrying our child, is that what you call a joke?" Her voice rose slightly, carrying across the room. "I will not apologize for my pregnancy, my feelings, or for being who I am." The guests were visibly divided. Some murmured in support, their expressions softening with empathy. Others shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to react, while a few of Ethan's closest friends looked taken aback, caught between loyalty and disbelief. The tension was electric, almost tangible, as Ethan attempted to reclaim control, gesturing wildly, trying to insist he hadn't meant it, but his words rang hollow against Claire's composed and unwavering confrontation. For the first time that night, Claire felt a surge of liberation. Her inner courage shone through, a quiet but undeniable strength that radiated from her every gesture, every word. She stood tall, chin lifted, unafraid, and utterly resolute. No apology would be offered, no submission would follow. In that moment, surrounded by curious and shocked eyes, Claire had reclaimed herself, setting the stage for the reckoning that was about to unfold. Claire had barely regained her composure when a quiet voice interrupted her thoughts. "Claire, you should see this," whispered a guest she trusted, sliding a phone discreetly into her hand. The screen displayed a video, short, but undeniable. Ethan had not simply made an offhand comment or reacted spontaneously. He had planned this. In the video, he could be seen rehearsing his words in a hushed corner earlier in the evening, chuckling as he scripted jokes about her pregnancy, mocking her in anticipation of maximum humiliation. A rush of emotions surged through Claire: shock, hurt, but above all, fury. This wasn't just thoughtless cruelty, it was deliberate. She pressed the phone tightly to her chest for a moment, letting the anger transform into focus. No longer would she be a passive victim. She now had proof to back her words, a weapon of truth she could wield with precision. Her mind raced, considering the best way to confront him publicly without losing her composure. Flashbacks flickered unbidden across her mind. The countless times Ethan had dismissed her feelings, the nights when she had sought support only to be met with indifference, the subtle but relentless undermining of her confidence, each moment now formed a clear pattern. His charisma had shielded him in public, but behind the polished smile, he had repeatedly neglected, belittled, and selfishly manipulated her. The humiliation at tonight's party was just the most blatant expression of years of disregard. Claire glanced around the room, her eyes sweeping over the guests who were lingering nearby, whispering amongst themselves. She could feel the tension building, the curiosity thick in the air. This was her moment, but she needed to be deliberate. Every word, every gesture, every pause would matter. She planned carefully. She would expose Ethan's intentions, reveal the truth of his cruelty, and do so in a way that commanded attention, respect, and undeniable authority. Her hand tightened around the phone. A quiet, confident smile touched her lips. The tide was turning. Claire knew that by revealing this evidence, she wouldn't just defend herself. She would make sure everyone in the room saw who Ethan really was. Tonight, she would reclaim not only her dignity but her voice, standing resolute in the face of orchestrated humiliation. Claire took a deep breath, her hand resting gently on her belly, feeling the tiny, insistent kicks from the life growing inside her. She turned toward the crowd, her eyes scanning the sea of curious faces, all drawn by the tension that had been mounting throughout the night. The murmurs faded into an expectant hush as she stepped forward, exuding a quiet authority that belied the vulnerability of her condition. Tonight, she would no longer be the quiet, humiliated observer. Tonight, she would speak the truth. "Everyone," she began, her voice clear and unwavering, "I want to share something important." The room stilled completely, the previous whispers replaced by a tense anticipation. "For too long, I've been subjected to jokes, comments, and behavior that were meant to humiliate me, all while smiling politely and pretending it didn't hurt." Her gaze settled on Ethan, whose confident smirk faltered as the weight of her words pressed against the facade he had carefully maintained. Claire recounted moments of emotional neglect, nights he ignored her discomfort, days when her feelings were brushed aside, and instances where his own selfish desires took precedence over her well-being. She spoke of his deliberate orchestration of tonight's humiliation, backed by the evidence discreetly shared with her earlier. Each anecdote was delivered with precision, her voice steady, her posture unyielding. The guests listened, rapt, as the story unfolded, a portrait of charm hiding cruelty, charisma masking selfishness. Shock rippled through the room. Some guests gasped softly, unable to hide their disbelief. Others leaned forward, murmuring quietly to one another, processing the gravity of her words. A few frowned, shaking their heads in disapproval at Ethan's behavior. Meanwhile, Ethan, realizing the tide had turned, attempted to defend himself. "Claire, that's not fair," he stammered, gesturing weakly, his face flushing with frustration. But his words rang hollow. His carefully curated image had cracked under the weight of truth, and no excuse or denial could restore it. Claire's composure never wavered. She stood tall, proud, and resolute, letting the room absorb every word. In front of these witnesses, she reclaimed her dignity, exposing not only Ethan's actions but the stark contrast between who he wanted to appear to be and who he truly was. The social fallout had begun, alliances shifted, judgments were made, and the once sparkling party now hung in a fragile balance, teetering on the revelation of one woman's courage against one man's hypocrisy. The atmosphere in the grand hall shifted almost instantly. Ethan, once the undisputed center of attention, found himself shrinking under the weight of his own actions. The whispers started quietly, a ripple that quickly became a wave of judgment. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, some discreetly raising their phones to capture the scene, while others muttered words of disapproval, their faces hardening with disgust. A few influential attendees quietly slipped out of the room, unwilling to witness further humiliation, but the damage had already been done. Ethan's confident demeanor, once unshakable, crumbled in real time. His voice grew louder, strained, defensive, but it lacked any persuasive power. He waved his hands in denial, tried to laugh off the confrontation, and even attempted to charm a few remaining guests, yet each gesture only highlighted the growing chasm between his projected image and the reality Claire had exposed. Anger burned in his eyes, mingling with shame and disbelief. He had lost control, and the more he tried to regain it, the further he sank into social ruin. Claire remained calm, her hands resting gently on her belly. She did not gloat, did not raise her voice further. Her victory was quiet, dignified, and complete. She allowed the guests to witness the contrast, the poised, empowered woman standing before them versus the man whose manipulations had been laid bare for all to see. Liam stepped forward, subtly offering a supportive smile, while other friends who had remained silent now moved closer, reinforcing her presence and strength. Their quiet solidarity was a balm to Claire's nerves, a visible reminder that she was not alone. The shift was palpable. The room's energy no longer belonged to Ethan, but to Claire's courage and composure. As Ethan's collapse deepened, the humiliation he had intended for Claire rebounded upon him. The balance of power had shifted irrevocably. Claire, standing tall and unshaken, felt a surge of satisfaction not born from vengeance, but from the quiet triumph of restraint, dignity, and the undeniable truth. Tonight, she had not only defended herself, she had rewritten the narrative, reclaiming her voice, her presence, and her respect in front of everyone who had witnessed the scene unfold. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, spilling soft gold across the mansion's manicured gardens. Inside, the echoes of last night's chaos lingered like a ghost. Half-empty champagne glasses, overturned chairs, and the faint scent of lingering perfume serving as silent reminders of the spectacle that had unfolded. The party was over, but the aftermath was impossible to ignore. Conversations whispered in corners, reputations quietly fractured, and alliances, both old and new, were subtly reshaped in the wake of Claire's confrontation. Claire stepped out onto the balcony, the cool morning air brushing against her skin. She leaned lightly against the railing, her hands resting over her belly, and took a deep, calming breath. The city below was awakening, and for the first time that night, she felt a sense of serenity. The tension, the embarrassment, the fear, they had all dissipated, leaving her with a quiet clarity. She reflected on her survival, the strength it had taken to stand up to Ethan, and the undeniable value of her own self-worth. Motherhood, she realized, had awakened not just protective instincts, but a deep reservoir of courage she hadn't fully appreciated until now. Inside, Ethan was facing the consequences of his actions. Friends and colleagues whispered in disapproval, some openly questioning his character, while others avoided eye contact, unwilling to confront the stark reality. His social credibility had been eroded, leaving him isolated, a stark contrast to the man who had entered the party hours earlier. Emotionally, he struggled with the humiliation, unable to regain the composure or charm that had once defined him. A few guests ventured onto the balcony to offer Claire quiet words of admiration and support. Liam stayed nearby, a reassuring presence as she listened to gentle praises of her courage. Others lingered in hushed tones, unable to resist gossip, but it mattered little. Claire's dignity had been fully restored. As the sun rose higher, she allowed herself a small, contented smile. The night had tested her, exposed truths, and transformed relationships. Yet she felt empowered, grounded in her own strength, and surrounded by the unwavering support of friends who had truly witnessed her resilience. The dawn wasn't just the end of the party, it was the beginning of her reclamation, a new chapter defined by courage, dignity, and unwavering self-respect. The morning after the party carried a quiet stillness that felt almost sacred. Claire sat by the wide living room window, the soft light of the sun spilling across the floorboards and illuminating the space with a warm, golden glow. She traced the curves of her belly with gentle fingers, feeling the life inside her and the sense of power it brought. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind, not with shame, but with clarity. Each moment had revealed her strength, her resilience, and the depth of her independence. She had stood tall in front of the very people who had once seemed to control her world, and she had emerged with her dignity intact. Ethan approached cautiously, his steps hesitant. His face carried a mix of regret, frustration, and disbelief. "Claire, I'm sorry," he began, his voice tentative, almost pleading. But she had learned that his apologies were often hollow, ways to smooth over his own guilt rather than truly acknowledge the harm he had caused. Claire looked at him steadily, her eyes firm. "I hear you, Ethan," she replied calmly, "but apologies don't erase years of neglect and humiliation. I'm setting boundaries now, for myself, for our child, and for the respect I deserve." Her close friends gathered around, offering gentle smiles and words of validation. Liam stood nearby, silent but unwavering, a quiet anchor in the storm. Sophie hugged her, whispering, "You were incredible, Claire. You stood up for yourself and for your future." Each word reinforced the newfound strength she had discovered within herself. Claire allowed herself to consider the future, not one defined by Ethan's whims or judgments, but by her choices, her independence, and her unwavering sense of self-worth. She felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years, a freedom that came from reclaiming her own voice. Rising from her seat, she moved to the balcony once more. The sun was higher now, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold. She rested her hands on the railing, gazing out over the awakening city, and let herself breathe in the quiet promise of a fresh start. The sunrise mirrored her own journey, hopeful, resilient, and unshakably hers. Weeks had passed since the tumultuous party, and Claire moved through her days with a calm sense of purpose. Her pregnancy had advanced, but rather than feeling constrained or fragile, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that came from knowing her own strength. She decorated the nursery with soft colors, arranged carefully chosen furniture, and filled the room with love and intention. Each small task reminded her that she was building a life not just for herself, but for the child she would soon welcome into the world, a life free from fear, humiliation, or control. Meanwhile, Ethan's world continued to crumble in subtle but undeniable ways. The videos and accounts of his behavior from the party circulated quietly but effectively among their social circle. Friends and acquaintances distanced themselves, invitations disappeared, and whispers of disapproval followed him wherever he went. The man who had once commanded admiration and envy now faced judgment, isolation, and the slow erosion of his carefully curated reputation. Even his closest allies began to question his character, leaving him to grapple with the consequences of his cruelty and selfishness. Claire, in contrast, thrived in her new reality. She surrounded herself with friends who truly cared for her, who celebrated her strength, and who offered unwavering support as she navigated the final weeks of pregnancy. Liam remained a steady presence, a quiet reminder that genuine respect and kindness existed beyond Ethan's world of superficial charm. Sophie helped organize small gatherings, creating a network of support that reinforced Claire's independence and sense of belonging. One afternoon, as Claire prepared a simple meal in the sunlit kitchen, she overheard Ethan being mentioned in passing by a mutual acquaintance. Their tone was dismissive, tinged with disbelief at his attempts to regain influence. For the first time, Claire smiled without bitterness. The man who had tried to diminish her had lost the respect of everyone who mattered, while her reputation, her dignity, and her sense of self had only grown stronger. Looking out the window at the rising sun, Claire felt a deep sense of empowerment. The trials of the past weeks had forged a new version of herself, resilient, confident, and wholly independent. With her supportive friends by her side and the promise of motherhood ahead, she embraced the dawn of a new life, one defined not by fear or judgment, but by hope, courage, and unshakable self-respect.